Welcome back. There is a sacred bond between a driver and their vehicle. Unfortunately, for the people in today's video, that bond is based entirely on complete mechanical delusion. Today, we are opening the garage doors to hear from the traumatized mechanics who have survived the absolute chaos of customer confidence. We have compiled 15 of the most baffling and chemically unstable things car owners have ever said out loud. From using Antifreeze as window soap to turning the engine bay into a mobile barbecue pit, these folks completely shattered the laws of engineering. Number 1. We start this automotive circus with a customer who marched into the repair shop visibly furious. She was demanding to know why her vehicle was actively trying to blind her. According to her, every single time she used her windshield wipers to clear away the rain, the glass would instantly transform into a thick, greasy, opaque nightmare that made it completely impossible to see the road. The mechanic, expecting to find a melted wiper blade or maybe some road tar, popped the hood and checked the washer fluid reservoir. It was filled to the brim with a bright blue liquid, but it did not smell like glass cleaner. It smelled like sweet, toxic maple syrup. The customer had proudly done her own maintenance. When her wiper fluid ran out, she walked into a hardware store, looked at a massive wall of automotive chemicals, and grabbed a jug of concentrated engine antifreeze. Her entire justification for this decision was an absolute masterclass in toddler-level logic. Well, the fluid I used last time was blue. Ethylene glycol, the main ingredient in antifreeze, is not a soap. It is a highly viscous, oily thermal transfer fluid designed to keep metal engine blocks from melting. When you forcefully spray an oily chemical onto cold glass and smear it around with rubber blades, it does not clean the surface. It creates a dense, highly refractive, sticky film that aggressively grabs onto every single particle of dust, dirt, and exhaust fumes in the air. She wanted a crystal clear, sparkling view of the morning commute, but instead, she successfully converted her windshield into a high-visibility fly trap, ensuring that driving through a light drizzle became an extreme, sightless, extreme sport. Number 2. For our next scene, we have a story that proves trying to be helpful over the phone is the absolute fastest way to completely destroy a customer's engine block. A man called the shop in a panic, saying his temperature gauge was glowing red and his car was overheating on the side of the road. The mechanic, trying to save the guy a towing bill, gave him a very simple piece of advice. Just open the hood, find the coolant reservoir, and add some distilled water to get the temperature down so you can slowly drive it here. An hour later, the customer arrived, but he wasn't driving. He was sitting in the passenger seat of a heavy-duty flatbed tow truck, and his engine was completely, permanently locked up. The mechanic popped the hood to investigate. The plastic coolant reservoir was completely bone dry. So, where did the water go? The mechanic unscrewed the oil filler cap on top of the engine and found his answer. The customer, possessing zero anatomical knowledge of an internal combustion engine, simply found the largest, most obvious cap on the motor, unscrewed it, and dumped gallons of cold water directly into the engine's oil pan. When you mix water and heavy motor oil, they do not naturally blend. But when you introduce that mixture to a heavy steel crankshaft, spinning at several thousand revolutions per minute, it violently churns the fluids together into a thick, foamy, pale brown emulsion that mechanics affectionately call the forbidden milkshake. This frothy sludge possesses absolutely zero lubricating properties. The intense kinetic friction instantly superheated the moving metal parts, completely fusing the internal bearings together. He wanted to gently nurse his overheating vehicle to the clinic, but instead, he successfully churned his own engine block into a solid metallic brick, upgrading a simple $20 coolant leak into a catastrophic financial apocalypse. Number 3. Next up, we have a vehicle that rolled into the bay completely dead on arrival. The engine would crank, but it absolutely refused to start. The mechanic ran a diagnostic, realized the engine was starving for fuel, and dropped the heavy gas tank to inspect the fuel pump. What he found inside was not gasoline. The entire bottom of the tank, the pump filter, and the fuel lines were completely caked in a thick, sticky, dark brown mass of hardened caramel. When confronted with this sugary nightmare, the owner proudly admitted exactly what he had done. His car had been running a little rough, so he went online to look for a cheap solution. He found an internet forum where a completely anonymous troll suggested that dropping a few sugar cubes directly into the gas tank would act as a mild, natural abrasive that would gently scrub the fuel injectors clean as it passed through the system. Here is where basic chemistry aggressively punishes gullibility. Sugar does not dissolve in gasoline. It simply sinks to the bottom of the tank. But when the fuel pump sucks those sugar crystals up and forces them into the incredibly hot environment of a running engine, the heat causes the sugar to instantly melt, burn, and caramelize. It didn't exfoliate anything. It acted like industrial-grade superglue, permanently sealing the delicate fuel injectors shut and choking the life out of the engine. He wanted to give his internal combustion system a refreshing natural spa day. But instead, he successfully baked a highly explosive dessert inside his gas tank, financially ruining his vehicle with the absolute confidence of a naive internet scholar. Number 4. Now we move to a story that challenges the very concept of routine maintenance. A customer arrived at the shop completely baffled. His car, which he had owned for several years, had suddenly started making a horrific, violent screaming noise before aggressively shutting off in the middle of a busy intersection. The mechanic walked over, pulled the engine dipstick, and found absolutely nothing but a crusty black powder. He turned to the customer and asked a standard diagnostic question. When was the last time you had your oil changed? The customer looked back at the mechanic with genuine, unadulterated confusion. Change it? What do you mean? I thought the oil was put in at the factory and it just lasted for the entire life of the car. The mechanic glanced at the odometer. The dashboard proudly displayed a mileage of over 80,000 kilometers. This man had driven his vehicle across the country multiple times without ever unscrewing the oil drain plug. Motor oil is not a magical solid-state component. As it cycles through the extreme heat of an engine, it slowly breaks down, loses its viscosity, and burns off. Over the span of 80,000 kilometers, whatever liquid was left inside that engine had baked into a thick, abrasive coal-like sludge. Any liquid barrier between the heavy metal pistons and the cylinder walls. The engine generated an incomprehensible amount of heat. The internal components actually melted and bonded together in a spectacular display of accidental friction welding. He wanted to enjoy a stress-free lifetime of zero-maintenance driving, but instead, he successfully forged his pistons into a single, immovable piece of modern art, proving that completely ignoring your mechanic is the absolute fastest route to buying a brand new engine. Number 5. Now, a story that proves the oldest pranks in the world are still incredibly effective. A young teenager, likely a newly licensed driver, pulled his car up to the garage bays. He rolled down the window with a look of deep, genuine concern on his face. He looked the veteran mechanic dead in the eye and said, "Excuse me, sir. My right turn signal is blinking way faster than my left one. My dad told me that means my blinker fluid is running dangerously low. Can you please top it off for me?" Let's completely unpack the electrical engineering and the psychological warfare happening in this exact moment. Turn signals do not run on hydraulic pressure. They run on a simple electrical circuit. When a light bulb burns out, the electrical resistance in that circuit drops significantly. To warn the driver that a bulb is dead, the car's electrical flasher relay is designed to cycle twice as fast. It is a brilliant built-in safety feature. The kid's father knew exactly what a fast blink meant. But instead of just telling his son to go buy a new bulb, the dad saw a golden opportunity to initiate his child into the brutal, unforgiving world of automotive hazing. The mechanic now had the terrible burden of looking this poor, embarrassed kid in the eyes and explaining that his own flesh and blood had completely betrayed him for a laugh. He wanted to be a responsible, proactive vehicle owner handling a mechanical crisis, but instead, he successfully walks right into a generational trap, sacrificing his automotive dignity at the altar of a $5 light bulb. Number 6. Next, a customer who arrived at the shop complained that his car was vibrating so violently on the highway that his teeth were rattling. The mechanic walked out to the parking lot, crouched down next to the front wheel, and immediately spotted the terrifying problem. Out of the required 5 steel lug nuts holding the heavy metal wheel to the hub, 2 were completely missing. The mechanic checked the other wheels. It was the exact same story all around. When the mechanic confronted the owner about the fact that his wheels were practically falling off, the customer waved his hand dismissively. He explained that he had lost a few nuts in the dark while swapping out his winter tires. His defense was an absolute masterpiece of misplaced confidence. Look, the manufacturer puts 5 of them on there just to be safe. 3 is totally enough to hold it. It's like a stool. You only need 3 legs. An automotive wheel is not a stationary bar stool. It is a heavy mass of rubber and alloy spinning at over 800 revolutions per minute. The engineers did not add 5 steel studs for aesthetic symmetry. They are designed to evenly distribute the immense lateral shear stress generated every single time the 2-ton vehicle turns a corner. When you remove 40% of the fastening hardware, you are aggressively forcing the remaining 3 metal studs to absorb an incomprehensible amount of kinetic fatigue. The metal literally begins to bend and stretch under the unbalanced load. He wanted to save himself a 5-minute trip to the local hardware store to buy a handful of cheap metal bolts. But instead, he successfully engineered a high-speed game of mechanical roulette, aggressively threatening to permanently divorce his tires from his chassis right in the middle of morning traffic. Number 7. For our next scene, we have a story that proves you should probably read the owner's manual before assuming your daily commuter has hidden racing capabilities. A furious woman pulled into the garage, complaining that her vehicle was completely gutless. She said it was struggling to accelerate, driving incredibly slowly, and most alarmingly, emitting a thick, horrific, burning smell from the rear end. The mechanic slid into the driver's seat to check the dashboard for warning codes and instantly found the culprit. The heavy emergency handbrake lever was yanked up to the absolute ceiling. When he gently informed the customer that she had been dragging her locked rear wheels across the asphalt for 3 entire days, she rolled her eyes and corrected him. She pointed at the bright red exclamation mark illuminating the dashboard and proudly stated, "No, I pulled that lever to turn on the red light. That is the indicator for the sport mode. Here is the catastrophic thermal reality of sustained kinetic friction. The handbrake operates via a thick steel cable that physically clamps the rear brake pads directly against the metal rotors. It is an immovable mechanical vise designed to hold a heavy vehicle completely stationary on a steep hill. Driving with it engaged means the engine is violently fighting the brakes with every single rotation. The constant brutal contact generates an unbelievable amount of thermal energy. Within hours, the metal rotors glow cherry red, the brake fluid literally begins to boil inside the lines, and the composite friction material on the pads glazes over, turning into a useless sheet of glass. She wanted to unlock the aggressive hidden racing potential of her grocery getter. But instead, she successfully converted her rear axle into a mobile high-temperature foundry, financially vaporizing her entire braking system in the name of imaginary aerodynamics. Number 8. Next up, we have a story that highlights the absolute panic of not knowing how your own vehicle defends itself. A giant, heavy-duty flatbed tow truck aggressively backed into the repair bay, dropping off a completely immobilized sedan. The furious owner jumped out, yelling that his car was completely defective. According to him, the ignition lock was entirely broken, the key absolutely refused to turn, and the vehicle was permanently bricked. The veteran mechanic calmly grabbed the keys, climbed into the driver's seat, and noticed the front tires were turned sharply to the left. He grabbed the steering wheel with his left hand, gave it a firm, aggressive wiggle to release the tension, and simultaneously turned the key with his right hand. The engine instantly purred to life. The customer stared through the window, his jaw hitting the pavement, and whispered, "Are you some kind of wizard?" When you turn off a car and pull the key out, a thick steel pin drops directly into the steering shaft. physically locking it in place to prevent thieves from steering the car if they hotwire it. However, if the car is parked on an incline or the wheels are turned, the massive weight of the rubber tires pushing against the asphalt puts immense twisting pressure directly on that steel locking pin. Because the pin is jammed tight, the mechanical ignition cylinder refuses to rotate. Wiggling the steering wheel simply takes the pressure off the pin. He wanted a highly sophisticated diagnostic rescue for a catastrophic mechanical failure. But instead, he successfully paid a massive towing fee to watch a man gently jiggle a piece of plastic, publicly surrendering his dignity and his wallet to a basic, spring-loaded anti-theft pin. Number 9. Now we move to a story that proves the human brain completely shuts down when exposed to extreme summer temperatures. On a blistering, humid day in the middle of July, a customer stormed into the air conditioning repair bay. He was sweating profusely, incredibly angry, and demanding to know why his car's AC was actively trying to cook him alive. He aggressively stated that the AC button was glowing green, but the vents were blasting air that felt like a hairdryer. The mechanic leaned into the sweltering cabin and looked at the center console. The AC button was indeed turned on. However, the large, incredibly obvious temperature dial right next to it was cranked all the way to the right, sitting firmly in the dark red zone for maximum heat. Allow me to introduce you to the thermodynamic battleground hidden inside a modern dashboard. An automotive climate control system contains two completely opposing thermal radiators. The AC evaporator core contains freezing liquid refrigerant, while the heater core is pumped full of boiling hot coolant flowing directly from the engine block. A small plastic flap called the blend door determines which radiator the cabin air passes through. Because a running internal combustion engine generates several hundred degrees of raw thermal energy, the heater core will always, mathematically and physically, overpower the air conditioning compressor. By turning the dial to red, the customer was forcing freezing air directly through a boiling radiator. He wanted a frosty, refreshing escape from the midsummer sun, but instead, he successfully engineered a high-velocity, localized sauna, forcefully paying a mechanic a diagnostic fee to simply reach out and rotate a plastic knob exactly 2 inches to the left. Number 10. And now a story about unwanted performance upgrades. A customer rolled into the parking lot sounding like a professional drag racing tractor. The noise was absolutely deafening, rattling the windows of the garage. The owner stepped out of the vehicle, looking weirdly proud but highly annoyed. He told the mechanic, "My car magically morphed into a high-performance sports car overnight. It sounds incredibly cool, but my neighbors hate it and keep calling the police on me. Can you turn the volume down?" The mechanic didn't even need to open the hood. He raised the vehicle high up on the hydraulic lift and pointed a flashlight underneath the center of the chassis. There was a massive, clean-cut gap in the metal exhaust pipe right where the incredibly expensive catalytic converter used to live. A car engine is essentially just a metal box containing thousands of violent, localized explosions every single minute. The exhaust system is a highly tuned acoustic maze designed to catch, bounce, and cancel out the concussive shockwaves of those explosions. The catalytic converter plays a massive role in dampening that sound. When a thief slides under your car at 2 in the morning with a battery-powered angle grinder and removes that critical piece of plumbing, there is nothing standing between those raw explosions and the open air. The engine isn't making more horsepower, it is just vomiting unfiltered sound waves directly beneath the floorboards. He thought his vehicle had magically undergone a high-performance, nocturnal mechanical metamorphosis, but instead, he successfully received a master class in urban scavenging, financially sponsoring a local scrap metal thief while permanently converting his daily driver into a deafening illegal noise violation. Number 11. A customer had his sedan towed into the shop, completely dead. He explained to the mechanic that he had heard a terrifying, rhythmic, heavy metallic banging noise coming from deep under the hood during his morning commute. But because he was running late for work, he refused to pull over. His brilliant solution was to simply crank the radio up to absolute maximum volume so he would not have to listen to the annoying sound. Roughly 20 kilometers later, the car violently shuddered, died, and refused to crank. The customer then looked the mechanic dead in the eye and asked, "Did the stereo drain the battery and kill the car?" Allow me to introduce you to the brutal, unforgiving interior of an interference engine. The heavy knocking sound was not a mild complaint. It was the vehicle screaming in absolute agony. A car engine relies on a timing belt to keep the heavy pistons in the bottom half perfectly synchronized with the delicate valves in the top half. When that belt snaps or slips, the camshaft stops turning, leaving the valves hanging wide open. However, the massive, heavy pistons keep launching violently upward at thousands of revolutions per minute. That knocking sound was the horrifying noise of solid steel pistons aggressively smashing into the open metal valves, bending them into unrecognizable shapes and completely shredding the internal combustion chamber. He wanted to enjoy a peaceful, musical morning commute, but instead, he successfully orchestrated the catastrophic acoustic disassembly of his own powertrain, forcefully converting his internal combustion engine into a localized scrap metal maraca. Number 12. For our next scene, we encounter a customer whose confidence was only matched by his complete lack of basic diagnostic logic. A furious man stormed into the lobby, slamming his hands on the counter. He demanded an immediate free warranty replacement for his car battery. According to him, the battery was completely defective because his car would sit in the driveway, loudly churning the starter motor over and over. But the engine simply refused to fire up. "Your cheap battery is absolutely refusing to send a spark to the engine," he yelled. The mechanic calmly walked out to the parking lot with the customer, climbed into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The starter motor roared to life with incredible, vigorous energy, desperately trying to spin the engine. The mechanic then simply glanced down at the dashboard and pointed a single grease-stained finger at the fuel gauge. The needle was buried so far below the empty line that it was practically pointing at the floorboards. The gas tank was an absolute bone-dry desert. Here is the beautifully simple reality of the automotive electrical triangle. An engine requires exactly three things to run: oxygen, an electrical spark, and combustible fuel. A starter motor requires a massive, heavy surge of electrical amperage to physically spin the heavy steel flywheel. If the engine is cranking rapidly, the battery is not just working, it is performing like an absolute champion. The car was starving to death, begging for gasoline, while the customer blamed the electrical system. He wanted to loudly exercise his consumer rights and score a free auto part, but instead, he successfully proved that no amount of electrical voltage can convince an engine to run on sheer entitlement and atmospheric air. Number 13. Next up, we head into the garage bay for a culinary disaster that proves the engine compartment is an absolutely terrible place to prepare your lunch. A customer brought his car in, visibly annoyed, and accused the mechanics of spilling some sort of bizarre chemical during his last oil change. He claimed that every single time he turned on the cabin heater, his car filled with the overwhelming, intense smell of roasted garlic and burning meat. The confused mechanic popped the heavy hood and began sniffing around the engine bay. When he looked down at the massive, cast iron exhaust manifold, he found a charred, smoking, unrecognizable lump of black carbon tightly wrapped in aluminum foil. The mechanic pulled it out and showed it to the customer. The owner's face instantly lit up with recognition. "Oh, right," he said. "I bought a garlic roast beef sandwich and put it on the engine to warm it up while I drove. And then I completely forgot about it." Let us quickly review the extreme thermodynamics of raw exhaust gases. The exhaust manifold is the absolute hottest exterior component of a vehicle. It literally funnels the direct, raw fire of the internal combustion process directly out of the engine block. Within 5 minutes of driving, that thick iron pipe reaches temperatures well over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It is not a gentle warming oven. It is a violent, high-temperature foundry. Because the climate control system pulls fresh air from the plastic cowl directly above the engine bay, the fan was violently sucking the toxic smoke of a cremated sandwich straight into the passenger cabin. He wanted to enjoy a perfectly toasted, savory lunch on the go, but instead, he successfully converted his ventilation system into a mobile crematorium, financially paying a mechanic to forcefully evict his charred beef from the premises. Number 14. Now we move to a story that perfectly illustrates what happens when you apply toddler-level color-matching logic to highly volatile industrial chemistry. A heavy tow truck backed into the shop, dropping off a sputtering, smoking, violently shaking gasoline-powered sedan. The mechanic pulled the fuel line, took one sniff of the fluid inside, and instantly knew what had happened. The tank was completely full of diesel fuel. When the mechanic informed the owner of this catastrophic fueling error, the customer aggressively defended himself. Well, yes, I used the diesel pump, but it is entirely the gas station's fault. The handle on that pump was bright green, and my absolute favorite color is green. So I naturally assumed it was their ultra-premium luxury gasoline. Let us completely unpack the catastrophic chemical mismatch he just poured into his tank. Gasoline and diesel are fundamentally completely different liquids. Gasoline is a highly refined, highly volatile spirit, designed to be ignited by a tiny electrical spark. Diesel, on the other hand, is basically a heavy, thick, oily syrup. It does not evaporate, and a spark plug absolutely cannot ignite it. Diesel engines rely on immense, crushing physical pressure to create enough heat to detonate the fuel. By pumping green-handled diesel into a gas car, he coated the delicate fuel injectors, the cylinder walls, and the spark plugs in a thick, unburnable layer of industrial slime. The engine was essentially drowning in syrup. He wanted to treat his beloved vehicle to a premium, color-coordinated luxury beverage, but instead, he successfully suffocated his entire combustion cycle, forcefully sacrificing his fuel system at the altar of his favorite color. Number 15. Finally, we wrap up today's masterclass in mechanical ignorance with a story about the absolute worst way to handle a dashboard warning. A customer drove his car into the shop, complaining that the engine had zero power, it was violently shaking at stoplights, and it felt like it was going to stall at any second. The mechanic slid into the driver's seat to check the dashboard for warning codes. What he found was a thick, perfectly cut square of black electrical tape stuck directly onto the plastic instrument cluster. The mechanic peeled the tape back, and immediately, the bright amber glow of the check engine light illuminated the cabin. When asked about the tape, the customer casually replied, "Oh, that? The light came on a few weeks ago, but it was shining so brightly in my eyes during my night drives that it was super annoying. So I just covered it up." The tape couldn't have caused the engine to break, right? Here is the terrifying reality of ignoring your vehicle's central nervous system. The check engine light is not a suggestion. It is a desperate, screaming alarm from the onboard computer. In this case, the engine was experiencing severe catastrophic misfires, dumping raw, unburned fuel directly into the fragile catalytic converter. By placing a piece of tape over the warning light, the owner essentially walked into a burning building, located the blaring fire alarm, smashed it with a hammer, and then sat back down to relax while the flames consumed the walls. The tape didn't cause the mechanical failure, but it absolutely guaranteed its maximum destruction. He wanted a visually soothing, distraction-free evening drive, but instead, he successfully installed a localized eclipse over his dashboard, blissfully ignoring the aggressive mechanical death cries of his own powertrain until it was too late. That officially closes the garage doors on 15 of the most baffling automotive disasters in history. We learned today that engines completely refuse to negotiate with your favorite colors or internet life hacks. Treating a heavy machine like a kitchen appliance or silencing its warning lights with electrical tape is a guaranteed way to violently liquefy your savings account. Hit subscribe to join our crew. Stay smart, and please stop feeding your gas tank dessert. I will see you in the next video.